started. Hi, everyone. People start joining in. I'm trying to see if I recognize any names. Megan, Sydney. Let's see who else. Cole, good to see you. I'm looking in here. Rose, good to see you too. Lots of new names. Glad to see you all. Hi, Travis. I'm excited. I got lots of co-hosts today, everybody. So looking forward to our session. I'll do the little quick higher ed military spiel, and then I'm gonna let Todd get us going with the schedule because we have a jam-packed day. Really excited about it. For those of you who haven't been to a higher ed military careers and coffee before, my name is Monica Siren. I'm the Assistant Director of Editorial Strategy here. Mainly focusing on editorial content, resources, advice, news for the military affiliated space in higher education. And with that being said, I'm going to put a lot more links and information about higher ed military in the chat so you can check on it while we're listening today. But also very open to hear from you all in the space, topics, ideas, things going on, things you want to talk about, things that you want to hear more about going on in this space in an editorial form. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. And Todd, we can, usually these are a little informal. We can, chat in the chat box there. So feel free to put in your LinkedIn information if you're willing to connect with others, and I'll do the same. So, all right, Todd, I think it's you. Does that sound right?
Sounds perfect. Thank you so much, Monica. I want to give her big props, before we get started for military or higher ed military for sponsoring and hosting this and just coordinating. So thank you, Monica. Big time. Well, welcome to California Colleges Veterans Consortium, Counselor Consortium, CCVCC. I know we're not like a official organization, kind of grassroots, but I wanted the individuals that have really partnered and helped put this together. We're kind of going on our second year. I wanted them to introduce themselves, Colin and Janelle. And I'm not sure if Leslie's there. I don't think Bobby was able to make it. I think he's on doing active duty, but I'll turn it over to the three. Start with Colin.
Sure. My name is Colin Williams, Vets Coordinator, Counselor at Saddleback College. 14th year down at Saddleback. We're right next to Camp Pendleton.
Hi all, Janelle Brecky. I am a MAP CPL counselor with the California MAP Initiative and also a Veterans Resource Center counselor at Norco College. And I'm going to try to unmute Leslie Todd. I think she's having a few issues with the panelist access.
While you're doing that, yeah, we have limited time because he's all the way in Atlanta, kind of a special guest. Some of you probably have heard this upcoming speaker that we have. He's presented in a lot of different things. I've heard him twice, and just every time it just learn something different and new. So we got Dylan Bender. He's a veteran, author, Veterans Program Director, MFT. You're out at Irvine running that program. And I'll let you kind of do your introduction. And I don't know if Leslie's able to jump in. If not, we'll just move right on to Dylan.
I finally have some audio going. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leslie Alarcon. I'm the Veterans Counselor at Moreno Valley College. I am also a 10-year Navy veteran. I've been with CCVCC for about 6 months, and it's been great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Leslie. And then I forgot to introduce myself, Todd Steffen, Veterans Coordinator Counselor. I used to be a coordinator at Diablo Valley College for the last 3 years, and thanks for joining in today. So we'll go right into Dylan because I know he's got to jump on a plane as soon as he's done. Dylan?
Yeah, thank you, Todd. I'll just share my screen here and go to the podcast. Okay, I think it's sharing. It's thinking. Okay. Just want to get a confirmation, Todd. Can you see that? Excellent. All right. So again, I've presented this multiple times, and I do have to get credit where credit is due. So I worked in the vet center, the VA vet center, doing readjustment counseling for multiple years. I mean, I did a full career there after I left the Marine Corps and did combat readjustment counseling. And um, I had lectured out of Colin's class at Saddleback because I was right next to his class, and I did that multiple times. And this presentation really grew out of this. But that was the place it was playing out. Where it was really taking place was in the counseling room. And in the counseling room, I began to notice that there was something else going on versus PTSD or even moral injury and spiritual injury. There was more going on. And it was probably about 5,000 hours into my clinical experience that I started going, there's something more. There's something more. I'm having a hard time putting my finger on it. And then it started, as I started digging in, I started going, okay, this isn't PTSD because I can treat PTSD. I can treat PTSD in a pretty smooth manner and reduce the symptomology pretty quickly. And quickly is relative, but the idea was like, but what would happen is I would treat PTSD, the PCLM, their scores would go down, but then oftentimes they would surge back up after they'd gone away. And it was like, what is going on? And then I began to dig, what is else going on? And I even started digging into my own process, talking to vets. And I started to get into more that there was a difference between PTSD versus the process. There was another process going on, and in this process, I was having a hard time putting my finger on what exactly it is. I forgot to fully introduce myself. I was in the Marine Corps 8 years as an infantryman and a reconnaissance man. And then I did that full career at the VA doing combat readjustment counseling. And now I'm the director at Irvine Valley College. And I'm kind of a unique director because I can actually still provide mental health to our veteran population. So I still get to do that. But I think what is unique, especially coming into higher education, is I'm kind of an outsider. I'm not career higher education. I didn't know that. And I've come in with a fresh lens. It's coming up on my second year now. And so I've kind of seen it and known that, learned little things. And I will tell you, I am so excited about the higher education realm. And I'll get into that. And especially with what the counselor's role is, what I see in that, and how balancing it out with Colin. But let me tell you what triggered me to start thinking, what is it? What is it that the process is? And I want to share this quote with you. And just quickly, I'll just read from my slide because I really want you to get this quote. And it was, boys were taken from the fields and office and factories and classrooms and put into the ranks. They were remolded. They were made over. They were made to about face. They were put shoulder to shoulder, and through mass psychology, they were entirely changed. We used them for a couple years and trained them to think nothing at all of killing or being killed, then suddenly discharged them and told them to make another about face. This time they had to do it on their own, readjusting, without mass psychology, without officers' aid and advice, without nationwide propaganda. We didn't need them anymore, so we scattered them about without any speeches or parades. Too many of these fine young boys are eventually destroyed mentally because they could not make the final about face alone. Now, what's so unique about this is when it was written. First, this was written by Smedley Butler, who was one of the most decorated Marines in Marine Corps history, has 2 Medal of Honors, 3 Purple Hearts, multiple Silver Stars, multiple different things. But then he wrote this in 1936. This is like almost, we're coming up on 100 years ago. And so it's, wow, if he is saying that through mass psychology, they transformed them, it's like, well, over 100 years or 90 years, how much better have we gotten at mass psychology? And I mean, there's a tremendous book, if you really wanted to dig in some of the psychology of this, On Killing is a great book by Dave Grossman. And he studies like the idea of how do we condition our warfighters to cross that threshold to be able to kill, because it hasn't always been the case. And they trace it all the way back from the World War I and even earlier to how effective and ready they are and the percentage that they can do it. And it goes back to the psychology, but the psychology is bigger than even just how do we get them to kill. It goes, how do we condition them to see themselves? And so why this is relevant, because we all know the USC study that is done like I think every 3 to 5 years, and it's still the number one issue that needs to be addressed that keeps getting brought up is this transition. The transition is still that number one. Obviously, housing and money, those are the two foundations. Those got to be taken care of. But then this one still is one of the number one of, notice this, I highlighted that with they were not prepared for the emotional difficulty that accompanies that transition. And even it cited this as most didn't anticipate how hard the transition was going to be. And they don't anticipate it until they get into it. And what's so scary about this, I was just looking at the data this morning, the most recent research on the suicide of like the highest risk population is in that 0 to 2 years from leaving the military. I mean, for those of us who are at the colleges, I mean, that is the realm there with us. We have 2 years. And so 2 years, and this goes from 3 months, and it slowly titrates down of the lethality and the outcome as they move on past the 2 years, but it's still very high. And it comes back down to this emotional side. And this is where I want to kind of show you, and I apologize if I'm moving quickly, I have a lot to get into a little time, is we all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I know I can speak this to the counselors. I know you've all seen this. You all did your basic psychology classes, and essentially the current transition programs as we know them, like TRS, on base, stuff like that, is all focused on these base two: physiological needs and safety needs. It's essentially like, where am I going to live? And what are my benefits? How am I going to get money? And then we start going like, what is the next level? Those safety needs, the employment. What am I going to do for work? And that. Now, those two things usually, and I say this cautiously, anytime in our history, those are probably being answered better now than they ever have, because you're getting benefits. I mean, they're getting all these things so we can get those established. But then what happens is those upper three of the Maslow hierarchy of needs are not being addressed. They're not being addressed. They're not being touched. And this is where we begin to see, if they get past these first two, we start to see in those later 2 years that these really start to vibrate and really start to have a problem. Let me even just use the example, because how I learned this was, it was sitting with veterans in the room. And so I just don't want to be the talking head here. I want you to hear what they say. Now, but sometimes I've had a problem where the audio doesn't play. So just let me know, Todd, if the audio is not playing, and I'll skip this.
Yeah, no audio, Dylan.
No audio? Okay.
No.
All right. Well, I'll just skip that because I've done that race. Essentially, that was a veteran, a non-combat veteran, and she was expressing of how she transitioned and left. She transitioned from the military, and that's exactly what they said. Those first 2 years, she tanked, and she didn't have those things that she did have before. And what she does is she highlights what this research study, this is the actual, I took a picture of it and highlighted it. What this research study was groundbreaking when it came out. And you can see it was in 2016, it came out. And what this research study highlighted, that reintegration stress, that entering back into the civilian environment, had a unique effect on suicidal ideation, the thoughts of thinking about suicide ending your life, ideation over and above PTSD and depression symptoms. That just is startling, because for so many years, everyone was saying, oh, it's PTSD, it's depression. And they were saying, no, it's reintegration stress is what they started identifying. And they defined reintegration stress with, it was difficulty maintaining military friendships, that loss of the tribe, loss of the culture, difficulty getting along with relatives, like strained relationships, like not just, they say relatives, but it means like wife as well, children, extended loved ones. So the relationships, difficulty feeling like you belong in the civilian society. So not fitting in, and difficult finding meaning and purpose. And I'm sad that that video didn't play, because you would have heard her say all of those things. And it's just, that's where I started to see it, is in the room. I started seeing all these things and seeing them, and I was like, okay, well, this highlights it. Oh, I'm just going to skip that. But it's like, I started digging in of like, okay, well, how are they doing this? How are they making us into this? Because I went down the path, I was like, well, how do we treat this? And even that research say didn't have anything of like how you treat it. So what I did is I reverse engineered, and I said, well, what did they do to us in boot camp? Because if we understand that, then we have a platform of which we can work with. And so this is just a quick abbreviation. Is the first is what we call behavioral conditioning. It's the classic operant conditioning that we all kind of understand that the military does. But there are some very unique ones of operant conditioning. And then there is existential conditioning. This is where they really are installing an identity and installing meaning and purpose, is one of the biggest ones. And then this one isn't so much a conditioning as much as is a time frame, the developmental time frame of which you get these young, impressionable minds. And then we get the social and cultural. And what they all build up is into putting together of like all the conditioning you go through to make a warfighter. And it takes thousands of man hours to condition those things, to build them in. And then when we're leaving the military, there's maybe 40 hours. Maybe if you do a skills bridge, there's additional like 60 hours or specific training, but it is no way close to the amount of hours that went into intentionally conditioning those things. Now, just in the sense of the behavioral conditioning is quite unique. And I always like to ask this question as like, this is probably my favorite behavioral conditioning, if that's an appropriate term, is how do I get 1% of you be willing to lay down, sacrifice yourself for the remaining? So if we took this, if there was 100 people in this training, how do we get 10 of you to be willing, or even just less of that, but how do we get 10 of you to be willing to put yourself in harm's way for the remainder of you? Well, this is a very unique phenomenon. Now, the good thing is this next video doesn't have audio, so I just want you to pay attention. I'll kind of describe it. So what this is a barber shop. And this is the barber shop, and notice that's a toddler that's just running down the road. And then the barbers kind of notice, hey, there's a toddler running down the road. And then they seek and they run out and grab that toddler right before that big truck. I mean, that big truck probably would have been the big one. And now they're looking for the parents. But why I like this video is what it captured. What it captured was, why would these barbers that are just sitting there doing their job and they see a toddler, why would they run out almost into traffic to save a child? And I know in the chat and people could comment, but the reason they do that is because the child is helpless. The child can't protect himself. The child doesn't know how to protect themselves. So what happens is they're tapping into a phenomenon of what they call heroic altruism. This is the same thing that happens to us in boot camp. After they tear us down, they begin to build us back up. And then they begin to make us feel superior to civilians in lots of different intricate ways of making you feel superior. And you're like, what are they trying to do? Is just create egocentric jerks? It's like, no, what they're trying to do is to tap into heroic altruism, because now they're trying to create the mindset of, hey, these 10 are going to put themselves in harm's way for the 90, because they're saying to themselves, well, we have to. We are the ones who are equipped to do this. We are the ones that are capable. So they put themselves in harm's way, and they're tapping into a deeper phenomenon. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think the Marine Corps and the Army and all of them thought about this and like, how do we brainwash them? They've just done what works, and they've tapped into things and noticed this is what works. This is what works. But what's so unique is, as I went through all my advanced psychology classes, I started breaking these things down and going, that's what they were doing. Wow, that makes so much sense. It makes so much sense. But let me ask you this. We transition a veteran who has gone through this conditioning, and then we take them out, and then we just drop them back into a classroom and say, you're one of them now. When they've been separated in their mind for so long, what do we think is going to happen? They're naturally not going to fit in. They're naturally going to potentially rub and things, but that's just one aspect. There's so much behavioral conditioning. And I don't say that, please, when I use the term behavioral conditioning, I'm not saying I was like, I can't believe they did this to us. No, I'd say they made us good war fighters. And for fighting wars, it's very effective. But the problem is then coming back in, they don't do the work to help us to become good veterans. And the reality is like most of them would even know that that's like what they want done. That's just behavioral. I'm going to skim through these other ones just for the sake of time. The existential, I've shown this to thousands of veterans, and they look at it and they laugh. And then notice it's a full battle rattle gear, kind of like a real bad mamba there. And then it says PTSD. What happens when you get home and realize you'll never be this awesome again? And veterans look at it and they laugh and they go, it's so true. Because it's not PTSD, that's the pun of it, but it is a very real experience of losing significance. And when you lose a sense of significance, it is the opposite. Even if you look at some of the CDC and some of the mental health stuff, is the highest suicide rate among all population, especially with men, is when they lose significance. When they lose whatever that is that gives them significance, it's usually when the suicide rates are the highest. And then we have the developmental classic, let's go back to the Erickson's theory of development. They get us right when the formation of identity is happening. And they're not going to allow role confusion to happen. It's going to be identity, and they're going to pound it in with a hammer, and you're going to be this for 4, 6, 8, 20, 30 years. You will be this. But then notice 21, 22, sometimes 24, and then you get out, you've moved into the next developmental phases, and you're having to go back and revamp something that you've already moved past. And then the last one, which is probably one of the most striking ones, people don't often think about this, but the cultural, with no question that cultures form identities and meaning and purpose and stories. There's a lot of good literature on this, but we minimize the military culture and almost put it as like it's a subculture. But when you put all the criteria of a primary culture, which these are, you actually start to see is, no, the military fits all the key components of a primary culture, like social organization, traditions, the religion, the way they express this, having chaplains that minister to everybody, language, anachronistic English, arts, literature, and education are different. Form of government. Military is definitely not a democracy. It protects a democracy, but it doesn't run like a democracy. The economic system, it's a completely economic system where everything's provided for you. The one thing that is kind of lacking, and I say that minimally is lacking, is you're not born into it. It's not like it's an ethnicity you're born into that kind of goes with that culture, but it definitely has a birthright to it. It has a rite of passage for every service that they have to go through to be entered in. And so everybody has to go through the rite of passage, because you can't just walk onto that Camp Pendleton and say, I'm a Marine now. And they're like, no, you're not. You need to go to the boot camp and go through the rite of passage to become this. Now, I hope you have heard is like, I haven't mentioned anything about combat. And I actually like to call this the combat effect. This is the difference, is all of this is not combat hasn't taken place yet. All of this takes place even before combat. And many guys and girls, they go through this and they never get deployed to combat, but they were made into this. I really like to use this metaphor of, I do think combat does make an effect of difference, but let me explain it like this. Let's just say you work with clay and you're making a vessel for war. You make that vessel for war, and then you set it out and say, wait here, or I'll put it here until we need to use it. But then you may never have to use it. And then you're done with it. It's sat out in the sun. The vessel hardened in the sun and things like that. But those that get sent to combat, it's like taking that vessel and putting it in the kiln. It's like it hardens even deeper. And then potentially you add on PTSD and potentially combat related injuries on top of this that complicate it. And now we'd see this happens to all warriors in general, because this is how you produce them. And please, different services have different intensity levels, I will say, but all services at some level do this type of conditioning. Now, you can see is culture, camaraderie is what's missing. The identity piece is what's missing. And then purpose and meaning. Those are the big three things that were totally conditioned that are left out of any transition process. But I will admit they're confusing of like, well, how do you help treat those? I know that's not gonna go. You help treat them. We have to help them adapt. It's not assimilate, because that's why I call even my book, The Warrior's Dilemma, is it's a dilemma. It was the strongest part of you. What do you do now when you're leaving and you're not taking it with you? So I truly believe a great college program, and I honestly think higher education is the best model, and I could go into why I'm passionate about this, is because we can help them build community. We can help them build an identity, and we can help them find purpose, because when they hit the college, they're starting to feel the pain of it, right? When they're still active duty, they're not ready because they're not feeling the pain of it. It's once they get out, they're starting to feel the pain of those not having those things. And then this is why I think counselors are so important. Counselors, I realize I'm a rarity because I can do mental health as the director, but the counselors, most of you have the background, because we're not talking about therapy. We're talking about like helping people, the strength space, find who they are. I think most counselors at some level with career centers have like the strengths finders and things like that. So there's so much stuff that's already built into what we do. But I know there's a lot of bureaucracy there. And I know Colin's told me about it. Sometimes it's hard because you got so many other demands and everything. But I truly think in the veteran population, the counselors are going to be the key to moving this needle forward. I'm sorry I went so fast. And to do this, again, I just want to get you the information. And then I do want to shift this off to Colin, because I think it is about making it really practical. My videos are not gonna, but these were 3 books I think are critically important to have your veterans read. One is called Failing Forward. It's teaching veterans how to deal with failure, because there's so much failure failure is connected with shame, and we have to change the way we think. Transition, amazing book in the sense of embracing that transition and normalizing it's not supposed to feel good. And then the last one, and I hate to self-promote, but I extensively write about this, where there's chapters on each one of these. If you want to understand more on that, you have that's the QR code that you can use, and you can get that. Or even if I've tried to even work it out with higher education. I'm trying to get where if you want to purchase them, I can get a 20% off, because I'm more about just getting this out to our veterans more than anything. It's not about money. It's not about notoriety, nothing like that. It's more of just getting it out to our veterans so that they can know what's going on, so they can feel like, okay, this is normal to go through this, and then the path out. Now, Colin, I will turn it to you. Please bring the ship home. or land the plane.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. And I'll keep it short just for the sake of time, but you know, identity, purpose, community, those are three things that as veterans counselors, we're in a unique position to address. And I want to make that, you know, really clear that, and I've said this before, and it gets mixed reviews, I will say, but I really believe that as veterans counselors, if we're strictly focused on academic planning and GI Bill compliance, which is a huge part of our job, and ignoring those other things, that we are really missing a huge opportunity to change their lives for the better. I mean, just yesterday, I had a conversation with a veteran that was struggling. And when I told him that transition is difficult and people minimize how difficult it can be for veterans, his response was, "Really?" And I was like, "Yes, I see this all the time." And he said, "You do?" And I was like, "Yes, it is normal. This is extremely difficult." But as a veterans counselor, if you're not getting into those kind of conversations with your students, especially new students, if you're not having those conversations, you're really doing them a disservice. We are trained to provide personal, career, academic counseling. Our degrees give us that skill set. We need to utilize them. And we need to tell our administration and help them understand why it's important that our appointments are an hour or maybe an hour and a half, at least with new students, because there's so many topics to address. And that's a difficult conversation. We finally just moved a little bit forward at Saddleback, where we have hour appointments for veterans, but we're going back to back 1 hour with 30 minutes of follow-up for those 2 appointments, so we can send resources, we can point them in the direction that they need to go, connect them with mental health resources. We're not going to treat. We're not mental health treatment providers, right? As veterans counselors, even though some have that training. But if we ignore and minimize the difficulty of the transition, we're really not doing our job. And I'll just be frank about that. Our job is big. Veterans counseling is difficult. It's exhausting, all those things, and rightly so, because we deal with a very complex population, and try to get them ahead and back to forming an identity, being positive contributors to our society, help them rebuild camaraderie and friendships. So share that with your administrators, help them understand, show them Dylan's book, have them read it. It's very powerful. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Colin. And I believe Dylan, we might have had to leave because of catch a plane. Big props to Dylan. I know every time he speaks, I learn more. And as you talked, Colin, it really hit me hard to think, and I'll go into our next speaker, but when he was talking about within the 2 years, how many times have we had a student vet saying, "Oh yeah, I just got out," or "I've been out for about 6 months," and such a high risk time, right? And what an impact. And when they show up, you know, let's say it's August and classes are starting, they want their benefits, but taking that time to really connect, right? And that's key. And then doing a follow-up or whatever it may be. So thank you. Kind of not the rush, but kind of all ties in because we have an individual from our chancellor's office, California Community College Chancellor's Office, who is a dean of student services and has been really instrumental in advocating and supporting. And I believe she has some potentially great news on a slide. I saw the slides and I'm like, this could be major for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Mia Keeley. Thank you for joining us. And I believe the slides should be all set up.
Yeah, Mia, would you like me to share? Or
yeah, if you could share, that would be great.
I'd be honored. I'll do it right.
All right, so I'll just start with an introduction. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mia Keeley. I'm a Dean in Student Services for the Chancellor's Office. I have several categorical programs underneath me, and one of them is Veterans. So very happy to be here with you all this morning. So next slide, please. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Vision 2030, but I just want to talk a little bit about it. It has 3 main goals, which are equitable baccalaureate attainment, equitable workforce and economic development, and preparing for the future of learning with artificial intelligence. There are 12 actions tied to this vision, and the one that's especially important for veterans is expanding credit for prior learning. We'll talk about that on another slide. But the Chancellor's Office is committed to supporting our student veterans, their families, and faculty and staff who work in the Veterans Resource Centers. In the coming months, we'll be hosting a series of webinars for VRCs. So if you have topic ideas, please be sure to share them with either myself or Heather so we can plan those. Next slide, please. All right, the Veterans Sprint. I'm sure you have heard of this, but I did want to take it a moment to talk about it this morning. So all college presidents have received a message from Chancellor Christian encouraging participation. Our goal is to upload 30,000 joint service transcripts into MAP by Veterans Day, November 11th. You can see your college's numbers directly in MAP, and if you have any technical questions, please reach out to the MAP team. In addition, we're partnering with CalVet to launch an outreach campaign that ties together the I Can Go to College campaign with CPL information in hopes of bringing additional veterans to our campuses. The materials will be shared statewide through CalVet's network of county offices and CalTAP. So this is a lofty goal with not much time left, but wanted to just be sure this was on everyone's top of mind. Next slide. All right, this is what Todd was talking about this morning. So at last week's Board of Governors meeting, our GR team presented the budget and legislative requests for 26-27, and the board approved those priorities. And so the one I want to highlight for you this morning is an ask to increase funding for Veterans Resource Centers. So we're requesting an additional $14.2 million in ongoing VRC funding. Most of that money would go directly to increase your college allocations. We are asking for a portion of it for a set aside that we could use for an AI platform to analyze JSTs for CPL. We'll also use some of this funding for professional development and new positions at the Chancellor's Office supporting both CPL and mental health for veterans. I do want to caution that this is an ask. So while it is exciting, we have to go through the budget process. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll talk about how that works a little bit. So the funding process begins now with the legislature. So this is the end of September where we're beginning to make our asks. The Board of Governors reviews and approves the asks that our GR has put together by legislative requests that come in from stakeholders system-wide. So the governor will release a budget in January. And then lots of behind the scenes negotiations take place. And I should say negotiations takes place all year from now to January. But once that January budget is released, we'll have an idea and we'll all be looking to see if this VETS proposal is there. If it's in January, that is a great sign because it means the governor agreed and it put it in from the start. If for some reason the money is not in there in January, that doesn't mean that there's no hope. It means that we'll be doing a lot of behind the scenes working with the league. We might even ask, veterans in the field and you all to send letters to the governor in support. So lots of behind the scenes negotiations. And then in May, the governor updates the budget proposal in what is called the May Revise. That is released on May 14th. This takes into account updated information on state taxes that have been collected, on property taxes. We have a better idea of how much money will actually be available in the budget in May. And then, of course, the legislature must pass the Budget Act by June 15th. So we're super hopeful that we will receive some of this money in the final budget. But again, we're just at the start of this process. We've been told that this could be another bad budget year, but it doesn't stop us from making the ask. So we're really excited about that. And Heather dropped into the chat The budget requests that the chancellor's offices are putting forth will be posted to our CO website tomorrow, and Heather put that link in the chat. All right, next slide, please. We also wanted to share with you that we started a new veterans listserv. We'll be transitioning over to this over the next few months. And to be added, you can just send an email to Heather at the email address listed there, and she will add you to the new listserv. Next slide, please. So Heather's now offering drop-in office hours. If you email Heather, she'll send you the link. These are informal sessions where you can ask any questions, connect with colleagues, and stay up to date. So really a time for you to join with any questions you have. I think even if you don't have questions, still great to join and listen to other questions that your colleagues are bringing to the table, because oftentimes you'll find you have the same questions and that might spur on yours. So super grateful for Heather for adding this. Next slide. Yeah, finally, really wanted to touch on our very first VRC All Directors training. The registration just launched this week. It's going to be the first one that we're holding December 3rd in Orange County. It will be in person. We are asking for 1 rep per college. So while this isn't necessarily geared towards counselors, some faculty counselors we know are coordinators as well. So if you're the coordinator for your program on campus, then we highly encourage you to attend. This is going to be a basics, nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of your role on campus, all the VRC funding and fiscal cycles, reporting in MIS, federal and state requirements. So just the overall needs that you have for your position. So really hopeful and happy to have this in person for the first time. Next slide. All right, that concludes my updates. I will throw my email into the chat because this one just has Heather's. They're happy to field questions. I think folks are muted, but if anyone has any questions, you can throw them into the chat. And I'm going to drop my email in here as well. So thank you, everyone, for giving me the time to speak today.
Thank you, man. And this ties perfectly into our next speaker, who is very involved with the Veterans Caucus, which has been a group around, and they do a lot of advocating. It seems like perfect timing with the proposed. I am personally really excited to see that go to legislation, because now it's time to, it reminds me a few years back when we first got our 10 million was to get that out, and then the voices of the student veterans, which made that happen. So thank you for everything you and Heather and the whole group is doing at the Chancellor's office. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ryan Connor. He's superintendent of Glendale Community College. He's also very active and one of the leads that's really been doing some great work, including a white paper. And I know he's going to share some stuff, how you can get involved with the Veterans Caucus to get that stronger voice and continue advocating, even in these tough budgetary times. The governor has opportunity to focus where he wants to put the funding in. So turn it over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, Todd. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If I can. Let me see if I can. Pardon me. While I load that up, I'll just say thank you to everyone who's already presented. Heather, Mia, that's great. And you'll see that this aligns with one of the asks that we've put together as a Veterans Caucus. So we have a statewide Veterans Caucus that operates under the Community College League of California. And it's an opportunity for folks to get together. It's a broader caucus than most. Most caucuses have trustees and maybe some CEOs involved. Ours has been very open to having practitioners as well, which means that the conversations definitely touch on those important areas related to what you all are actually facing in the field working with our student veterans. So more recently, what we've been focusing on is resources for the veterans centers. And just to put this out there, what our pitch has been, both to the Chancellor's Office, and obviously they have been great supporters here, is that we have more than 65,000 active military and veteran students in our system, and that doesn't even count the military families that are growing in each of our veteran centers. We know that there's complexity. We saw that in our first presentation, and there's requirement for really specialized support. Back in 2017, when we sought to get the initial funding for veteran centers, it was based on data. It was based on student information that showed we had a lack of staffing, a lack of knowledge of veterans' needs across our institutions, unmet mental health and health needs, and lacking services and staff in our centers. Unfortunately, what we're seeing from current surveys is not much has changed. And partly that is because the current funding for most colleges provides less than one funding for one full-time person. But the VRC requirements are for a coordinator or a director, depending on how you have it at your campus, a school certifying official, and an academic counselor. To use Glendale as an example, we serve just over 220 veterans. Our director is doing the certifying official duties, and we have a part-time academic counselor, and that's still with hundreds of thousands of dollars supported in our general funds towards our VRC, and our current funding is $60,000 in our veterans funding. And so we wanted to take these realities into place and say, what would it look like if we actually expanded the resources? And so the initial ask was aligned with Vision 2030, and I think you heard that a bit with Mia and Heather, to expand the VRCs with an array of services, including staffing, counselors, versed in the GI Bill requirements. That's directly from the State Chancellor's vision. And what we were requesting was bringing in an additional $35 million to bring it up to $45 million. The request comes from a general calculation that if we were to truly staff every veteran center with what is required in the list from the state, we would need $17 million for full-time directors, $17 million for academic counselors, and approximately $11 million just for one certifying official, knowing that the actual recommendation from the federal government is 1 per 125. And so we developed that request in collaboration with our committee, and we wanted to make sure that it aligned with the values of 2030, particularly credit for prior learning. And you saw that in me and Heather's presentation of the carve out with AI and seeing how we can do this together, and that's very much appreciated. And so the plan was to submit this request to the Chancellor's Office, to submit this request to the CCCT, which is the Trustees Association under the League, and to the CEOs. And the good news is all three of those have already been submitted, and you can see that the Chancellor's Office has already responded positively, asking for an additional $12 million, and that's great. And we need to now move into how do we develop support for this. Our current plan in talking with our caucus is to really lean on the military and veterans committees, which are represented by Assemblymember Pilar Shaivo and Senator Bob Archuleta, both who are very strong advocates of military and veterans in general, and specifically within our community college systems as well. We need to work with the organized groups out there, and the big points, as Mia mentioned, in January, we do go out there as a league to advocate to the legislators, and that's perfect timing with the January governor's proposal. And the students go out in March, which is perfect timing for trying to solidify support if we do not get into the initial January budget, or if we want to make sure it stays there. That March in March is something that we can really work on with our student veterans. Lastly, we could really work with letter writing campaigns or working through different sponsors with groups to see how we can support this legislative budget request. So that is where we are at now. We will convene with our group to see what the next steps will be now that we have this great announcement from the Chancellor's office, and figure out how we can best support their efforts to gain this additional funding for our Veterans Resource Centers. The only other thing I'll say as having the Veterans Caucus is this is a group of volunteers that do this because they care deeply about what we do to support our veterans, because they care deeply about what the veterans have done to support us and our country. Todd is always at those meetings, and it's a really important group. Each of these caucuses exist, and there's opportunities for colleges to have membership. I believe the membership is $250. And so if your college is not yet an institutional member, it might be worth an ask to have that membership, because those resources do go towards this type of advocacy for putting out different print materials and trying to do what we can for our veterans and for having a coordinated approach. So I just highly encourage membership from each of the colleges, because even outside the money, if we have all 116 colleges as members of our caucus, it brings a lot more power and value when we make our pitch going forward.
Yeah, I would just like to add, if I can, Ryan, what Ryan's saying is really important, because with the state budget every year, it truly is the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. Like, the more the legislators hear about and from stakeholder groups on their requests, the more likely we're to get the funding. And this veterans ask is great because it falls across party lines. This is something that both parties can support and will support. So really important to drum up as much support and vocal support as possible. So all the letters, all the speaking to your local legislature, all of that is going to be really important to get this ask. So thanks, Ryan. We appreciate your help on it.
Absolutely. And we're looking forward to working together on this. This is something that's really important for how we serve our veterans, and every little bit helps to make sure that we have the right services that address some of those needs that were discussed earlier. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Ryan. We actually have a few minutes for Q&A. And I just want to echo, I just put in the notes, we did Operation Veterans Funding. Nancy Montgomery and Daniel and a couple individuals really led that back in 2017, I believe 2016. And I know that was a big push, and that allowed at least the 10 million. So this is exciting times, even with a tough state budget, right? It can direct it to what we need. So I guess we open up to Q&A. Monica, since we have a little bit of time.
Yeah, that's great. For those of you who are willing to ask a question live, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you, and then you can share your question, or if you want to throw it in the chat and then we can answer them and read them that way. Ryan, Jane did ask if you could share your slides, so I can make sure that all of the slides are sent to the registrants. Definitely. If Ryan, you want to send that over to me at your convenience.
I'll drop it in the chat as well for the folks.
Oh, perfect.
We do have a one-page talking points as well that I'll drop in.
Lovely. And then Carla is asking, is the participation and membership specific to California Community Colleges staff? Seeking clarification for those of us who are not a part of the community college system in California.
It's a good question. I'll have to ask the league. But I do believe that it's exclusive to the California community colleges. But we bring in a lot of resources to have these discussions outside of formal membership as well.
Great. All right, the slides are in there. Okay, Colin, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm thinking for our region 8, and the other regions in the state. How would you recommend a regional consortium go about supporting the additional funding? Would it be to approach our local legislatures, or would it be the letters to the chancellor's office? Like, what would be the first step that you would recommend?
I'd love to hear from me and Heather as well, but what I'd start with is the first real step is seeing if this is going to be a system-wide priority. And that was the submission of the request to the Chancellor's office. You can see that they've responded to it. There's been similar requests to the League's two leadership groups, which are the presidents and the trustees. They should determine whether that's going to be a system-wide effort for them within the next month or so. I bring that up because if it is going to be a League and a Chancellor's office aligned priority, it becomes a lot easier to be coordinated about our approach, and we can lean on what the Chancellor's office is doing, who to go through, and when is the right time to approach those local electeds. So I would say right now it's a holding pattern just for about a month or so while we find out where everything's going to land. And then, yes, we would start doing the outreach to the local electeds.
So if we were, as a region, if we were able to, like write a letter in support, it would go to the Chancellor's office, trustees, and CEOs. Would that be
Really, I would
correct, Ron?
send, if once we, I would send that actually to the governor's office. I would send it to however your local legislature is in your region, because the CO is already behind it. So now we need the ledge to know that it has a lot of support.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll already be advocating for it, but the noisier the stakeholders are, the better.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I would say work with your local associated students, however you have that, ASU, ASB, AS, because they do plan that March in March. And I know that in January and in March, we'll be planning to integrate our veterans into that advocacy so that it's not just our veterans who are voicing this, but it's our entire student body that's recognizing that veterans' needs are student needs.
That's going to, March and March would dovetail with SVA's Washington Week. Typically that's in March. So dates aren't out yet, but that would be nice.
And I think the letters, like a month from now until the end of the year, so we can hopefully see this in the January budget, governor's January budget. And then once it's in there, then yes, have the advocacy beyond that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Todd, I saw your hand up for a second. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just a quick question, Ryan. When is the next Veterans Caucus meeting, and are people able to join in? I know the board meets, but I don't know when the next one is.
So the guaranteed next meeting will, I need to check to see if they're doing one at CCLC in November, but I know we have our January lobbying meeting, which I believe is the 23rd, but let me just pull that up real quick. Give me 1 second. Look at the League's calendar. But given the movement with the chancellor's backing of some resource allocations, we'll probably want to call one earlier.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all joining. I know people have to go. We try to keep this with 1 hour. We will have another meeting. I'll meet with our group. Most likely it'll be possibly in November as this semester's flying by. Appreciate everyone. Thanks for our presenters from the Chancellor's office, Ryan, all of you guys. And of course, the Colin and Janelle and Leslie and Bobby, who basically volunteer their time to help coordinate this. Thank you guys. And thanks, Monica, with Higher Ed. Appreciate it.
Yes, of course. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for attending. Jane, I can answer your question if you'd like after the call here, but see you all. Have a great day. Take care.